Alrighty, how is everyone doing? Welcome to my channel. Thanks for tuning in. This channel is for educational purposes. We look at all kinds of theories and discoveries and concepts that you might not be familiar with because they've been suppressed, but they have great power to transform your life in terms of your mental, spiritual, and physical health. This segment is called Bible Decode, and this is number 471. We've looked at all kinds of different aspects of the New Testament, uh, uh, emphasizing the Roman origins hypothesis, but also looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls, some deism, and some apologetics, and various different analyses from different authors who have delved into the true meaning of the New Testament. We are looking right now at the book from Randel Helms. It's called Gospel Fictions. Came out in 1988, and he just kind of looks into the psychology of the uh, writers of the Gospels. Now, I personally think that the writers of the Gospels were all Romans, Caesars, and their agents. Um, he doesn't know that, and so, but his analysis is still, I think, very relevant and telling, and can shed light on the psychology of the Romans, who were actually the authors. How did Mark, which came out first, you know, how did Matthew differ from Mark? And how did Luke differ from Mark? And, you know, are there connections? And where did they make the changes? And so we were into talking about a the virgin birth and how uh, Luke needed to use um, a few Old Testament and apocryphal works in order to kind of make coherent his version of the story. Um, and he talks about using the Testament of the 12 patriarchs, uh, which contains an oracle, supposed oracle of Levi, um, and also Micah 5:2, uh, and which required the birth to be in Bethlehem. Okay, so thus, where is the child who is born King of the Jews? We observed the rising of his star. That's in Matthew 2:2. Oh, I'm sorry, I said Luke. Matthew. We're still on Matthew. But the testament of Levi, one of the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, uh, mentions no magi. These formed a floating and almost universal element in legends about the births of and homage to kings and heroes. As Cicero says of the birth of Alexander the Great in De Divination, or however you would pronounce that, everybody knows that on the same night in which Olympias was delivered of Alexander, the temple of Diana at Ephesus was burned, and that the Magi began to cry out as the day was breaking. Asia's deadly curse was born last night. So, Asia being Asia Minor, where the Magi were from. Uh, so, when the Eastern ruler uh, Charebides, whom Pliny calls a magus, came to pay homage to Nero, he had brought magi with him. Now, well, that's interesting. That's right at this time period. Um, he had brought Magi with him. Approaching the Caesar, he knelt upon the wound and, with arms crossed, called him master and did obey, writing, writes Dio Cassius. In Matthew, when the Magi entered the presence of Jesus, they bowed to the ground in homage to him in Matthew 2:11. And not only Nero and Jesus received such honors. Suetonius, another Roman historian, writes in his life of Augustus that when young Octavius Caesar, uh, who's Augustus, was born, Publius Nigidius Figulus, the astrologer, hearing at what hour the child had been delivered, cried out, "The ruler of the world is now born." Everyone believes this tale. In the same section of this work, Suetonius adds that when Augustus entered the house of Theagenes, the astrologer, the man rose and flung himself at his feet. Oh, the story of the slaughter of the innocents has an equally complex origin. Um, not oh, just the story of the slaughter of the innocents has an equally complex origin. Well, that didn't really look to be that complex. It seems like it just is coming right from the Romans. And you can talk about some of these other, but the Augustus and the Nero uh, sections seem to uh, dictate to me what they were writing about. But anyway, so now we're at the slaughter of the innocents. Suetonius writes, according to Julius Paramus, the public portent warned the Roman people some months before Augustus's birth that nature was making ready to provide them with a king. And this caused the Senate such consternation that they issued a decree which forbade the rearing of any male child for a whole year. Likewise, in Matthew 2:16, it says that Herod gave orders for the massacre of all children in Bethlehem and its neighborhood. Well, there again, we have the obvious source for this to me. Um, for a whole year, so they up it to 2 years. That's a common theme when they do these typologies. Is you know um, uh, up it to make your hero a little bit greater than the other person was. Um, so um, you know. Uh, it seems like he's complicating the situation here. Um, the between the Dio Cassius, the Suetonius, and the Cicero, we have what I would just say is a Roman uh, origin for all of this here. Um, but anyway, okay, let's move on here. Likewise, Matthew says that Herod gave orders for the massacre of all children 2 years or less, citing a strangely irrelevant passage in Jeremiah as an oracle about the event. Um, Now, I don't know if that's an interpolated passage, but so were the words spoken. I guess this is how it goes. So were the words spoken through the prophet Jeremiah fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, a village several miles north of Jerusalem and far from Bethlehem, wailing and loud laments. It was Rachel weeping for her children and refusing all consolation because they were no more. Matthew possessed the legend and found the oracle. But note the following Jewish midrash on the story of the birth of Abraham. On the night when Abraham was born, Terah, his father, Terah's friends, among whom were counselors and soothsayers of Nimrod, were feasting in his house, and on leaving late at night, they observed a star which swallowed up four other stars. They forthwith hastened to Nimrod and said, "Of a certain of a certainty, a lad has been born who is destined to conquer this world and the next." On learning that Nimrod wanted to kill Abraham, his father Terah then went home and hid his son in a cave for 3 years. This time it's 3 years as opposed to two. So I'm not sure why the story of Jesus didn't one up them. But maybe because they didn't know about this story or didn't use it. That's what I would again submit. But maybe let's see. Uh, Now this is in Midrash. Um, okay, and Helms says this Jewish legend, which is of course amazingly similar to Matthew's account, is a fictional embellishment, as is Matthew's story of the Genesis and Exodus legends of the births of Abraham and Moses, enlarged by combination with the story of Salam in the book of Numbers. Indeed, there are direct verbal echoes of the latter two in Matthew's gospel. Um, uh, I, I, I don't. I'd like to see the evidence for that. I don't see it. But anyway, like the stargazers in the Jewish and Christian birth legends, is from Mesopotamia, the stargazers from the east. The phrases in Numbers 22:7 in the Septuagint and Matthew 2:1 are identical. Okay, so the same words, analolon or something. A well-known astrologer and diviner of omens, he has been summoned by Balak, king of Moab, who fears the Israelites, recent intruders into his realm. And I thought this was Balaam. In this, as in all the stories descended from it, the king and astrologers consult together concerning the newcomers into the realm who threaten the ruler. Um, in all the stories, the astrologers point to a special star, symbol of the arrival of the new force. In this case, Jesus, but in the prior case, Israel and Abraham. And so Balaam, it is Balaam, um, says, "A star shall rise," and that's Analele Astron, "out of Jacob. A man shall spring out of Israel and shall crush the princes of Moab." This is in Numbers 24:17. The astrologers in Matthew likewise point to a star. We observe the rising of his star. And they don't use the same language. Um, Lon Astera and La Anatophe. Um, that's in Matthew 2 2. Now, the source of the story of the king who wants to kill the infant leader of Israel shifts to the account of Moses in Exodus, the classic biblical legend of the wicked king, or Pharaoh, who wants to slay the new leader of Israel, Moses. Um, it just doesn't seem like he needs to use all of these different stories. If he just used the Roman, these other stories are just repeats of he's kind of bending over backwards to have them using these earlier stories from the Old Testament or from the Jewish legends when it isn't necessary. Um, and it just complicates things. If they just use the Suetonius, the Cicero, and the Dio Cassius, the Roman authors, um, they would have arrived at the same location. So I have to dispute this. Indeed, the story of Moses in the Septuagint provided Matthew with a direct verbal source for his story of the flight into Egypt. As Pharaoh wants to kill Moses, who then flees the country, so Herod wants to kill Jesus, who is then carried away by his parents. Um, After a period of hiding for the hero in both stories, the wicked king dies. And the Lord said unto Moses in Midian, Go depart unto Egypt, for all that sought thy life are dead. Now, I could see it if they were using like the exact same language. Um, when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who sought the child's life are dead. And the language is not the same. Those who, for all that sought thy life, are dead. Um, Zeluntes ten psychen. Um, Similar language. Anyway, that's in Matthew 2:20. Of course, Moses flees from Egypt to Midian, while the Holy Family flees to Egypt through Midian. Why did Matthew not make the parallel exact by having his characters escape likewise to Midian in the Sinai Peninsula? I thought he just said they did. Uh, the answer relates to Matthew's reading of another passage in the Old Testament. This was to fulfill what the Lord has spoken by the prophet. Out of Egypt have I created my son. And that's in Matthew 2 15. If God said he called his son out of Egypt, then to Egypt Jesus must have gone. As the stories of Moses and Balaam had supplied the star, the basis for Herod's wrath, and the Holy Family's flight, so Hosea 11 1 was found to predict where they would flee and thence return. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more I called them, the more they went from me. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning incense to idols. Hosea's outrage against Israel's stubborn idolatry, despite Yahweh's loving concern and his saving act of the Exodus, was taken out of its context by a mile, taken out of its context by early Christians who turned one time of a complaint, one line of a complaint about the present and the past into a prediction of the distant future, which is a common theme that we've talked about here. Uh, so Joseph arose, took mother and child with him, and came to the land of Israel in Matthew 2:21. Uh, Paralleling Moses, who took his wife and children, mourned them, um, mounted them on an ass and set out in Exodus 4:20. But Matthew now faced another problem raised by his earlier solution to the difficulty of Jesus's Nazareth upbringing, despite birth in Bethlehem. And though Matthew had Mary and Joseph living in Bethlehem for 2 years after Jesus' birth, he obviously could not continue to allow them to live there. How to bring them to Nazareth? Matthew provides a forgetful angel who must appear twice to Joseph. As has been said, the first time the angel of the Lord merely informs Joseph that um, uh, the first time the angel of the Lord merely informs Joseph that since those who um, threaten the child's life are dead, he may take the Holy Family back to the land of Israel. But the angel has forgotten to warn Joseph that Judea is still too volatile for them. And hearing, however, that Archelaus, one of the Herods, uh, had succeeded his father Herod as king of Judea, Joseph was afraid to go there. So this is, you know, uh, putting a band-aid on a wound, or a gaping wound, uh, and being warned by a dream, he withdrew to the region of Galilee, where there he settled in a town called Nazareth. So all of that, the forgetful angel is necessary in order to get Jesus into Nazareth from Bethlehem. But it isn't only the angel who has nodded. Matthew himself has apparently forgotten, if he ever knew, that another son of Herod, namely Herod Antipas, was also in control of the province of Galilee. By Matthew's criteria, that province ought to be as dangerous as Judea. Still, to Nazareth must he go. This was to fulfill the words spoken through the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. Yeah, so obviously this the story is fiction. Let us, however, um, uh, I'm sorry. There is, however, no such passage in all the Old Testament. Matthew had apparently vaguely heard that such a verse was in the prophets. And since he really needed to get the Holy Family from the supposed birthplace to the known hometown, he reported the fulfillment but left the biblical reference unspecified. So, yeah. Um, no such verse, but he pretends that there is one. And that's good enough, I'm sure, to satisfy 99.9% of Christians. Uh, just say it. You don't have to have the sauce. Like Matthew, Luke, okay, so we will delve into what Luke does about this tomorrow when we return. And we're going to stop right there for today. Um, I find that was pretty unconvincing. It seems like to me through Occam's razor that um, that Matthew could have gotten all that work done just by citing the Roman sources and not trifling himself with all of these rather obscure Jewish sources. Now, I can see that Helms needs to bring in those Jewish sources because that's where he thinks that Matthew's loyalties lie. But if you can get with the Roman origins hypothesis and recognize that all of the authors are agents of the Romans, then you don't need to do the contortions that he was doing to concoct the sources of the story. I don't believe. I don't. I could be wrong, but just from looking at it, uh, for this is only my second time through this. So anyway, like, share, subscribe, comment, and contribute, and share, which I say twice. Uh, Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day. Come back tomorrow for another Bible Decode.